All right, thank you guys for all coming here today. My name is Melissa Price-Crom. I'm the director of the North Carolina Voters for Clean Elections Coalition. And we are here today, once again, to defend our democracy. Unfortunately, democracy has been on the edge of demolition for years now, thanks to sustained attacks by extremist politicians. The last few months, we've seen our new conservative state Supreme Court overturn previously decided cases on voter ID and gerrymandering. Now, the same body that is allowed to gerrymander itself wants more and more power. This legislature wants to appoint judges to oversee whether or not their laws are constitutional and have a controlling stake in the Judicial Standards Commission to oust judges who don't toe the line. This legislature wants to take over the governor's power of appointment. This legislature wants to use the term election integrity to rationalize their efforts to suppress voters. Now, we shouldn't have to train people to run an obstacle course just to exercise their right to vote. And they're doing all of this, while not doing their own job to pass a state budget. Now this legislature wants to hijack our independent and state county boards of elections, creating evenly split boards where gridlock means the legislature gets to make the final call, including potentially limiting counties to only one early voting site or even deciding the outcome of elections themselves. This is a scheme that voters soundly rejected in 2018 with 61% of the vote. It is a scheme that the courts have already struck down as unconstitutional. It is an attack on our very foundations of our democracy. Now, today, you will hear from civil rights and state leaders on why attacks on our democracy in Senate Bill 749 will not stand.
Hi, I'm Ann Webb, Policy Director at Common Cause North Carolina. And we at Common Cause North Carolina strongly oppose Senate Bill 749. North Carolina already has a functional bipartisan election board and county boards that operate in the same way. Members from both major parties are members of these boards, and the chair is chosen by the governor, elected by the entire state. 749 is an unnecessary and misleading bill that is opposed by many North Carolinians, including the last 5 governors from both parties, who have opposed similar, even less far-reaching legislation. Let there be no mistake, Senate Bill 749 will deadlock our state and county boards in ways that are costly, chaotic, and calamitous for our elections. Instead of the current clear path to making decisions with odd-numbered members of boards, right now our county boards have 5 members, our state board of elections has 5 members. This bill would put 8 members on the state board of elections, evenly divided between the 2 major parties, and 4 members on each county board of elections, evenly divided between the 2 major parties. As a result, deadlock is inevitable, and this is not hypothetical. During a brief period when we had an even split on the state board of elections and the county boards of elections about 5 years ago, an example arose where there was disagreement in Wake County about whether to have an early voting site on the NC State campus. That decision was deadlocked at the county level. And the State Board of Elections was only able to break that deadlock because there was a 5th nonpartisan, unaffiliated member who was able to vote to break that deadlock and resolve that issue. We will also see an incentive for partisan deadlock to undermine access to early voting sites. In North Carolina, if there is not a unanimous plan at the county level for early voting sites, then there must be a request to the state board to issue an early voting plan for that county. If the state board is deadlocked as well, the default under state law is a single early voting site at the county board of elections. And I just want you to imagine Mecklenburg County, for example. Mecklenburg County had more than 350,000 people use early voting in the 2020 election. They have one county board of elections office with, by my estimate, less than 50 parking spots. How would that work? What would that look like in an election like the 2024 presidential election? It would be a disaster, and there would be every incentive for partisan gridlock to cause that kind of disaster. We are not only concerned about early voting. There are so many decisions that our county boards must make and that our state board must make where partisan gridlock could become a problem, all the way down to certification of final election results. And I just want to pause there and think about how close many elections in our state are for governor, for lieutenant governor, for council of state races, and even for the presidential election. Imagine if there was a partisan dispute about the certification of our elections statewide, and the only way to resolve it was to send it to the legislature to determine. Would that feel like democracy at work in North Carolina, or would that feel like a real partisan power grab? Thank you. I'm going to pass it to Rob Stevens.
Good morning. My name is Rob Stevens, ordained minister in the United Church of Christ and resident of Raleigh. For the past 13 years, many of us here have made what seems like a weekly or annual trek down here to defend North Carolina's democracy. You have to hand it to them to some degree because of the creativity that they have with how they're going to suppress the vote. They went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court trying with their power grab, and they were too extreme for Brett Kavanaugh. So that should tell us something. That what they're doing, what they failed to do at the U.S. Supreme Court, now they're trying to do it a different way here at the State House and at the North Carolina Supreme Court. This is an extreme power grab. And I want to read from a letter that repairs the breach delivered 2 weeks ago. It says, the lack of the willingness from state officials to create a democracy where its constituents have an equal and fair opportunity to vote, access to universal health care, educational opportunities, justice, and public safety is a morally and constitutionally offensive and a sign of their fear of the people. Because that's what you have to do when you pass some of the most unpopular, even as it's sinister legislation since February. Since they got here, they've been attacking women's rights, abortion rights, access to health care. They've held up Medicaid expansion that they finally passed after 10 years, after tens of thousands of people have died from lack of Medicaid expansion. Now they're playing games with it in the budget so that we have thousands upon thousands of North Carolinians without health care right now. And when you do all these things, when you criminalize protests, when you make it easier to get a gun in the 3 days after the massacre in Nashville, then your only recourse is to try to protect your power by making it harder to vote, by putting in death by a million cuts. These bills, I'm not a policy expert, but I know that these are long bills, and there's a ton of stuff in them that they don't even understand, which we'll see on the House floor later probably, but that they're putting in death by 1,000. So they have a lot of time on their hands to come up with these creative ideas to stop the vote. But we also have a history here in North Carolina of people standing up and fighting back. In 2013, we stood up, we fought back, we lost here, but we went to the courts, and by land, air, and sea, we fought and killed the Monster Voter Suppression Bill 1.0. We're going to use all of our resources, both in the streets, in the courts, and of course next fall in November at the polls. Because we know when we fight, we win. Next week, led by students from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, with faculty, family members, people impacted by gun violence, we'll be gathering right here at 1 p.m. for a mass rally and lobby day, where they will be bearing witness with blood on the hands, saying, calling on this legislature to stop making it easier to get guns and harder to vote. So stop making it easier to get guns and harder to vote. Let the people vote.
All right. Now, Detectiveville called our early democracy the great experiment. And that means that every generation gets to choose whether or not that experiment continues. Today, we are at one of those moments. We must unite against this threat, all of these threats on our democracy. After all, we built this democracy. It's ours, and we're not going to let a handful of extremists take it away from us. Now, we're going to take some questions now.
Yeah, hi there. I think, Anne, when you were speaking, you said that there would be, partisan motivations, I forget your exact word, to cause chaos. Could you just expand on why you believe that to be the case?
I want to share an example. Surrey County, this past election cycle, had a member of their county board of elections who didn't want to certify elections, didn't think that our election system was working the way they thought it should, and they were a duly appointed member of the board of elections and refused to do their duty of certifying that election. If that example were to spread around our state, we could see gridlock on any number of issues. And I want to be clear, this is not just early voting, this is not just certification of final election results. This is all the little decisions that have to be made by the county board of elections, from voter challenges to election recounts, to all kinds of aspects of where our precincts are going to be, redrawing precinct maps when necessary. All of those things require cooperation by the County Board of Elections, and many of them require unanimous votes. And so single members who choose to gum up the works could make a huge impact on our state.
You also mentioned the possibility of tying on certifying election results and that going to the legislature. What maneuver do you think they would use to have the General Assembly take up that decision? I don't know if they've laid that out yet.
Well, let me be clear. I need to do my legal research and get myself really clear about all the citations, but that's the way it already works, right? There's already a structure in place for what happens when certification is blocked up at the State Board of Elections level. And so that process already exists under state law. We need a process like that. There needs to be some final arbiter. But that is a possibility. And it's important that folks understand that this is not just an evenly split board is not just a hypothetical concern. There are many decisions that an evenly split board would need to make that it may not be able to make if it has members who are interested in gridlock. Yeah.
My understanding is the bill would take effect July 1 of next year. What concerns do you have about this not even taking effect until that close to the election itself? There could be a lot of things unresolved pretty close to election.
Absolutely. The way the bill is drafted, it appears that a new state board of elections and all new county boards of elections would be appointed sometime after July 1st, 2024. And I think we all know that that's not that many months away from November 2024. And it's going to be an incredibly important and critical time for our election system. And it is clearly the wrong time to completely reorganize our state election system in the middle of a critical election year that we all recognize is going to be a very significant year for our state.
Have you spoken to either sponsors of or supporters of the bill? Have they taken your meetings? Have they listened to you?
No comment.
Have you met with any of the folks? You won't comment on whether you've met with us.
We don't get meetings with sponsors of bills like this. Any other questions? Thank you all for coming out in the hot sun. Anyone else want to add anything?
My name is Tony Quadrarero. I'm a citizen. Sometimes you can't see the forest for the tree that you're looking at. We're looking at a tree here. If you go back to the time of Richard Nixon and the White House plumbers and Lee Atwater, The Republican Party has always tried to do things in the dark. Now, because they are able to reap the fruit of a poison tree, i.e. gerrymandering, they can do this in the broad daylight. And what's to stop them? They'll continue going and restricting rights, making sure that big money has the power, that the minority controls the majority, just like the Shiites and the Sunnis, until ultimately we move back to a situation where people who oppose them only have 3/5 of a vote. Because that was constitutional one time, and they are constitutionalists, and they'll go back to that. This has to be stopped. The people have to unite. They have to show up and get these expletive deleted out of here.
Thank you all.